One of these good little bats.
Check, check. Howdy.
Howdy.
All right. Welcome, everyone. If you would stand. I've asked John Kimbrough to come up and lead us in a prayer. Maybe a short story. I don't know. We shall see. We'll say our prayer and pledge. Thank you, Mr. Kimbrough.
Well, they're never short stories.
No story today. This is an unpaid, unsolicited political announcement. We have an Aggie on the San Antonio City Council. Seems to be the only one out of 10 or 11 that has any sense. He needs some help. There's another Aggie running for the City Council in the upcoming election. A member of this club, Patrick Van Dolen in District 9. We need to support that man. I don't live in that district, but if you live in District 9, we need to support Patrick Van Dolen. We need his help, or Clayton needs his help down at City Hall. Pray with me, please. Loving Heavenly Father, we thank you for the blessings you've given us. We thank you for Texas A&M. We thank you for Aggie Park. Father, we ask you to be with us and guide us. We pray most diligently for wisdom. Wisdom to run our lives, wisdom for our politicians to run our government. We ask you to be with us in our daily endeavors. Protect us from evil and bless this country. In your name we pray, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you, John. Welcome to everyone today. Do we have any new members or guests with us? Please stand to be recognized.
My guest is Sheriff Miller, also at United Texas Credit.
Oh, great. Nice to have you with us, Sheriff. Anyone else? Okay, good, great. Thank you for being with us, and please come back every Monday. We're here. Also, I don't have any record of silver taps. Does anybody have anything? Kistner?
Yola Mitchell passed away. Melvin Mitchell's wife, Lane Mitchell's mother, Bill Mitchell's mother, and Andy Mitchell.
Okay. So Miss Mitchell passed away. If you would, let's have a moment of silence and reflection to honor Miss Mitchell. Okay. Thank you, Dick, for that. Do you know how old she was? Anyone?
She's in mine.
We're saying 83.
83. Okay. Remember the Mitchell family in your prayers. Okay, Aggie Athletics. I tell you what, this past week was spring break, and we took our boys up to a game. It was a lot of fun to watch and to be back in that environment. Baseball's won 10 straight. Their pitching's been great. Jonathan Childress has been doing great, but they swept Sanford this last weekend. Sunday, the nightcap was 5-2. But the game before that, I think, was 24-1. They've been putting up points, but again, they're hot. This next weekend, we play at Florida, a 3-game stretch, so they'll get to test and see what they're made of. So I think baseball's going in the right direction. Women's track and field has an incredible team. They've got some really fast young ladies. The 4x400 relay won with a meet record of 3:26:68 Saturday night at the Randall Tyson Track Center. Softball continues their play. They had wins over Louisiana Tech 7-2 and Montana 6-0. And again, this marks the Aggies' 10th shutout of the season. and they're 17-3. Women's basketball tonight, they will find out if they got a #1 seed for the girls tournament. They've had a great year, and they're projected to have a #1 seed and #3 seed overall. So that should be good. Men's tennis, they're ranked number 12. Nationally, they dropped a match to Arkansas 4-3 over the weekend. And that's about all I have for athletics.
But men's tennis beat Baylor the week before, they were number 2. Baylor was number 2.
There you go. Okay, if y'all didn't hear that, men's tennis beat Baylor last week, and Baylor was number 2 in the country. So that's good. Also, capital campaign, everything's moving right along. We have our contractor. Right now, the total that we've raised is, you'll see it up on the board, $1,391,234.76. Anybody class of 76 here? No, okay, well, 76 cents. The match that we need to go to complete the maze match is $112,309, and we're getting there. We have some more coming in next week. So again, if you know of somebody, you can help us with this project. We're moving on. Before I go any further, if you're on the board of directors, would you stand up real quick and be recognized? I see Sloan, Chris, Steve, and all the others. Those of you that are in the audience that have been on the board, you understand how much time and energy goes into this. All of these guys and Becky there, Bill in the past, but everybody's put in so much time and energy, and I think we owe them a round of applause. Thank you guys. And Bill Hill, good to see you, Bill. And look at that good looking sign out there. It's looking really good, so we can't wait to get that finished. So thank you, everyone. Also, this Friday, we have a fundraiser, the Aggie Golf Classic out at Canyon Springs. Out of 144 potential players, we have 136 so far. We only have room for 2 more teams, so that's great. Also, we have a raffle, JW Marriott Staycation, a 2-night, 4 rounds of golf included for $10 a ticket if you want to take your chance at that. Everything that you can do to help us with the capital campaign and any fundraising goes a long way. The Fiesta medals. Logan is not here today to take a shot at your pride to buy some of our Fiesta medals. We've got our new ones. You can pre-order those. And we may have a couple left from 2020. So for $5, so help yourself. Also, this is our 100th year. So we're going to have a directory. If you would like to receive a print copy of that directory in paper, you need to let Mark and Mary know so they can add that to our list. Your name is in there if you're a member. It'd be a great time to become a member if you're not. So look for that. You can talk to Mark and Mary if you need more information on that. Also, we have some of our swag for our 100th year anniversary. Some of our shirts and jackets and hats. Some of them are over here. Some of them we need to place an order. So get your order in, talk to Mark and Mary, and we'll get that going.
Mark and Mary kind of like a radio show.
It should be. It should be. You hear that, Mark? I think that sounds great. The Mark and Mary Show. Okay, to update us on the next few lunches. Next week, it's to be determined. I'm still working on that one. March the 29th, we've got the mayor of Bryan, Texas coming, Andrew Nelson. April the 5th, Linda Lamantia, the chairman of the A&M PAC, will be here. April the 12th, I've got Jacob West coming with the Bartlett tree expert. So I think that'll be good. Bring your tree questions for him. Then April 19th, I've got Mike Smith. He's with the Department of Criminology at UTSA, and I think that'll be another good one. Okay, today we're grateful to have Carl Pikus come down from Austin, Texas. He said the traffic was no fun coming down here, but he made it anyway. Carl is from Chicago. He graduated from the University of Wisconsin at Madison, and so he's a Badger. And Carl has extensive knowledge in 1031 exchange rules and regulations. He's had 11 years serving as a wholesaler for a leading provider for REITs, DSTs, and TICs, now as an AVP for the nation's largest qualified intermediary Investment Property Exchange Services, Inc. Carl's real estate financial planning expertise enables him to explore strategic, comprehensive, tax-deferred 1031 solutions, and also to better educate his clients on all the advantages of these 1031 exchanges. Carl is an invaluable asset to real estate investors, to realtors, to lenders, attorneys, and tax advisors, and he's here to share some of those expertise in the 1031 exchanges with us today. If you would, give a warm Aggie Park welcome to Carl Pikus.
Thank you. I've been working on this for years. When I walk past the barber shop, I point at my head and laugh at them. A&M beat Sanford 24-1 in baseball this weekend. Is that correct?
Yes.
Makes you want us to try out for the Sanford team. I mean, how worse could we do? It would be fun to play baseball again. 24-1. Okay. Well, thank you to the A&M Club for letting me speak. I really appreciate that. I noticed that the A&M Club is 100 years old. And as a segue into 1031, the 1031 section of the IRS code is 100 years old. So it's been with us for 100 years. And it started in 1921 as a reaction to the country's first capital gains tax. To pay for World War I, federal government instituted a capital gains tax. It was 5%. Thought was if you owned a farm and you bought it for $100,000 and you sold it for $200,000, you owed the feds, for the first time in the country's history, $5,000, 5%. US citizens, being who they are, hated this tax, tried to figure out ways of not paying it. And they did come up with a way of not paying it, because you could go to a closing table and sell your $100,000 farm, not exactly sell it, but trade it with another person who has a $100,000 farm. So we go to the closing table, my deed's $100,000, your deed's $100,000, we swap deeds. No money was transacted, there's no gain, it cannot be taxed. So when people started figuring that out, they realized, well, I won't sell this to you for money, we're gonna swap some things to make sure that neither one of us pays any taxes on it. So if I did a $100,000 swap with someone who had a $100,000 farm and we swapped deeds, there's gonna be no tax. If I had a $100,000 farm and you had an $80,000 farm and we swapped deeds, the IRS could approach me and say, well, you didn't get $20,000 of value, that was an $80,000 farm, you gave him 100. And I'll say, no, not so fast. That is also my friend. He acknowledges the $20,000 difference. He went out and bought another farm and gave me title to that farm. So it is indeed a true swap. So that was the nature of the 1031 section of the IRS code, is the fact that you couldn't tax swaps. And that swapping was the way that 1031 was done up until the late 1970s, when there was a case called Starker. Starker argued to the IRS that their exchange was within the spirit of the law of the 1031 section of the code in every way, and within the letter of the law in every way but one, in that their swap didn't happen simultaneously. So they weren't able to close on their replacement property. It was delayed by a day or so. Starker argued to the IRS and says, look, why does it have to swap simultaneously? And the fact that our replacement property was delayed in terms of its close shouldn't make a difference. The spirit of the law was followed. And to the IRS's credit, it listened to that criticism and came up with the modern era of 1031 exchanges, known as the delayed exchange. The idea that you can sell an investment property, and keep in mind, it only applies to investment property. It does not apply to your primary residence or your secondary residence. It must be business property or investment property. You sell your business property or investment property, you have what is known as a qualified intermediary, the QI, hold the money on your behalf. It has to be done this way. If you take the money, you took the gain, you're paying the taxes. But if an independent third party holds the money on your behalf, then you didn't take the money. And the rules are pretty simple. Sell your investment property, let the QI hold the money. You've got 45 days to identify your replacement property. You've got 180 days to actually close on that replacement property or properties. It doesn't matter. You can sell one and buy several. You can sell several and buy one. What the IRS is looking at is, did you take the money? Did you take the gain? Because if you did, you've got two federal taxes to worry about. You have the capital gains tax at 15 to 23.8%, and you have the depreciation recapture tax, the one that everybody forgets, that's 25%. You're going to get taxed on that. And thankfully here in Texas, that's all we get taxed on because there's no state tax. If you live in the other 43 states that have a state tax, the average state tax there is 5%. California's being the highest at 13.3. Tennessee's being the lowest at 1%. If you ever wondered why so much California money is coming here, that is part of the reason. Much of it is exchange money because Californians will get taxed at least 30%, typically 40%, because of the state tax on top of the federal tax. And so 35% of all the exchanges in the US emanate from California. A lot of that money is coming here because California is overpriced. So that is the history of it. And we're on our 100th year of this law in place. We're seeing many, many more exchanges because people are getting more aware of this. And they certainly want to defer the taxes. Let me give you an example of the type of conversations I'll have with taxpayers who are interested in doing this. I'll get a call from someone who says, I just talked to my CPA, and my CPA says, I'm selling this property and I'm going to get taxed on it. And the CPA brought up 1031 and tried to explain it, didn't explain it particularly well. CPA got upset, said, call this guy. And I said, okay, thanks for calling. And what are you selling? And he says, I'm selling a rental house. And I'll say, okay, you don't live in the rental house, right? Because if he lives there, I can't exchange it. It has to be truly a rental house and investment property. He says, yeah, no, it's really a rental house. And I'll say, how much are you selling it for? And he says, $500,000. Right, okay, you just talked to your CPA. Tell me what your cost basis is, hoping that I can get through this quickly. And inevitably, they don't know what the cost basis is. So I'll try to figure it out. You're selling for $500,000. It's clearly an investment property. It's a rental house. When you bought the property, what did you pay for it? What year was that? And he says, I bought it 14 years ago for $200,000. So I'm now very interested in this conversation. If he's selling for $500,000, bought it for $200,000, I see a gain of $300,000. In my head, 15% is $45,000, 20%, and that might be 20% for him, there's $60,000. This person is a good candidate for a 1031 exchange, right off the bat. But he's had it for 14 years. He's depreciated about half of it. Depreciation of apartment buildings will depreciate to zero between year 27 and year 28. So he's had it for 14 years. I figure he's depreciated half of it. So I'll ask him, in the 14 years that he's owned it, has he ever added any value to the property? Maintenance doesn't count. Talking about capital improvements that really increase the property's value. And the guy says no. I'm like, okay. So $200,000 depreciated over 14 years. You probably depreciated half of it. Now I'm thinking his cost basis is about $100,000. He's selling for $500,000. At about 20%, that's $80,000. So I'll ask him, did your CPA say you owe about $70,000 or $80,000 in taxes? And the guy says, yes. Okay. If you don't want to pay that tax, if you want to defer the tax, you'd set up a 1031 exchange. And if you sell the property for $500,000 and you let the QI hold the money on your behalf, and within 180 days, you buy new investment property, then the 80 grand that would have gone to the government won't. It'll be in the principal of your new investment property. And the guy says, I'm ahead of you. Yes, we're going to sell this $500,000 property in a few weeks. That's why we're calling you. And yes, we're going to buy a new $600,000 rental house about 2 weeks after that. And I'll say, okay, that's thrilling. You've got this perfectly outlined. You pull this off, the 80 grand that would have gone to the government doesn't, it goes in the principal of his new investment property for $600,000. It's what I call the here and now. He's poised to save $80,000 in taxes. That's the first tax benefit of 1031 exchanges, and the most obvious tax benefit of 1031 exchanges. The second is in estate planning. It's what we in the industry call swap till you drop. It's a deferral. It's always hanging over your head. So he sold for $500,000. We did his exchange. He bought for $600,000. The 80 grand went into the principal of his new property. The government wasn't allowed to get the 20 to 25%. So he's deferred it. 10 years later, the $600,000 property becomes an $800,000 property. He gets an offer to sell it. He thinks it's a good offer. He wants to sell it. The tax hit has just grown. He continues to depreciate. It obviously has gone up in value. He's looking at about $130,000, $140,000 tax hit. He doesn't want that. He does another exchange. He buys two rental condos for $500,000 a piece, total of $1 million, and he sits on them for 25 years. 25 years later, the two condos are worth $1.5 million. Our taxpayer has been exchanging for 35 years. Our taxpayer is well into his 60s or 70s, and he needs to start thinking about this a little bit more seriously. $1.5 million is the value of the condos. His cost basis is effectively zero. If he sells the property and doesn't exchange them, he's looking at a $300,000, $350,000 tax hit. He could sell the property, exchange them in a new property, and then he's, of course, deferring again. He's swapping until he drops. The point is that when you die, the cost basis is reset. When you die, your heirs inherit the property. He died. Note he didn't sell the property. He dies, heirs, the kids, the grandkids inherit the property with a step up in cost basis. His cost basis was zero. He owes $350,000 in taxes. Kids' cost basis is $1.5 million, the value of the properties. Dad passes, kids inherit the property, new cost basis of $1.5 million. Kids sell the property within a year or two of dad's passing for $1.5 million. Kids owe nothing or next to nothing in taxes. Dad was able to take his real estate investments, never let the government get the taxes on them, retire with that much more money, own properties with that much more value and conceivably getting that much more rental income from them because they were worth more money. And he left that money to his kids without getting taxed. And the good news, for kids is that dad's estate is that much more. The bad news for dad is he's got to die for this all to work. But kids will love dad that much more as they're putting him in the ground and realizing there's $350,000 more in his estate for the kids to blow on whatever they blow it on. But that really is it. When I do these talks with people, I can talk about the rules of the exchange, the process of the exchange, the paperwork of the exchange. That's on us, and that's kind of boring. It's always the motivator of the exchange. It's the motivator of the taxpayer. There's a couple ways that I notice when we do this that taxpayers are motivated. One is the complete hatred of government. Anything not to give them any more money. That's one thing. In many cases, it's the love of family. And some don't make the mistake. Sometimes they're not there. Sometimes the hatred of government overcomes the love of family. But the point is that whatever the motivation is, it's very powerful. It's a lot of money. It's hard to think of another tax break that is out there that is this powerful, that allows you to add to your estate as you get older. So I wanted to discuss that and to give you the basics of the exchange. I want to get back to what you can exchange into and out of: office, retail, warehouse, apartment, hotel, motel, raw land, ranches, farms, rental houses, rental condos, rental vacation homes, et cetera, et cetera. When you're talking about investment property, it's any category of real estate that you can possibly think of. The best way to think about it is, what it's not. It can't be a primary residence. You can never exchange a primary residence. And you cannot exchange a secondary residence probably 95% of the time. If it's a secondary residence that you use very little, then it would qualify. But when you talk about those types of properties, those types of real estate investments, understanding these rules is very important. And unfortunately, there are CPAs who don't get it. There are attorneys who don't get it. And the biggest sin is the financial advisors who don't get it. I never understood that. The desire to sell something when you have the opportunity to save 25%, and a financial advisor saying, well, forget the exchange, just sell the property and we'll put it into stocks and bonds or something. Makes no sense at all. Let me give you an update on the politics of this. The Biden administration has publicly claimed that they want to get rid of 1031 exchange, but he doesn't seem all that dedicated to it. He's already backed away and said, well, maybe we won't get rid of it. We'll have a $500,000 exemption, which to us in the industry means nothing, because that means $500,000 a gain, a $500,000 sale. He doesn't know what he's talking about. We can let that one go even longer. That's a good comic pause. So our lobbyists in DC have talked to his economic team and believe that there is a disconnect between the political team and the economic team. The economic team doesn't have a problem with it. And there's a couple other things that have been going on. 3 years ago, our industry and our lobbyists anticipated a time when Democrats would own Capitol Hill and the presidency. So we've been lobbying them for the past 3 years. We believe we have the votes in the House Ways and Means Committee right now. It's because there's a very powerful arm of the Democratic Party that's progressive. There are still some old-time Democrats there that look at this and say, we don't necessarily want to get rid of this. This will upset people. Here's a good example of it. I mentioned California. California having a 13.3% tax, highest tax in the country. Californians do 35% of all the US exchanges. California is the power and economic power base of the Democratic Party. If they got rid of 1031 exchange, California citizens would be very, very upset. So that's another reason why we're optimistic. Other reason that we're optimistic, for a government that needs more money because it's 25 trillion in debt, you get rid of 1031 exchanges, the value of the properties will drop. The value of the properties will drop. State tax, the ability to tax those properties will drop as well. So a lot of things tied to this. And we believe that a tax change is coming from the Democrats. We believe that it'll be the classic things that they always want, which would be raising the capital gains tax to some extent, certainly raising the corporate tax and the taxing the rich idea. We don't think they have the political power to go that much deeper than that, to really change top to bottom, soup to nuts, the entire tax structure and get rid of 1031 exchanges. So we remain optimistic, and as long as it's in place, it is a wonderful tool for wealth growth and estate growth, and the ability to sell those properties or give those properties to your kids and keep that money in your family. And with that, I will open it up to questions if you have any. Not all at once. Yes, sir.
Have they talked about eliminating step up in games? Step up for the.
They have.
They have, that's what I thought.
Yeah, they have.
How would that affect it?
It'd be bad.
Right.
It would be bad. They're all landowners as well. They use this constantly. We would hope that they wouldn't do away with it. When you look at when this started in 1921 and the progression of wealth in the Kennedy family, it's an example of, I'm from Chicago. The merchandise mart sold in the early 90s was bought by the Kennedys in the late 1930s. And one of the Kennedys, I don't know which one it was, passed away, gave it to their kids. 1031 enabled that. Ever wondered how some of those families keep their wealth? 1031 is a great example, a great example of that. The gain on the merchandise mart in Chicago, which up until recently was the biggest building in the United States in terms of square footage. We're optimistic that their greed would preclude them from getting rid of this because it can work for all citizens. And then you have the Kennedys on one end, and then I did an exchange on the east side of Austin a couple years ago for a woman running a hair salon, started in the late 1960s, bought this property for $11,000 in the late 60s, and sold it for $1.2 million. And so she had a gain there of virtually $1.2 million. She had roughly a $300,000 tax hit. She pulled a little money out, paid the taxes on it, deferred the rest of the taxes into DST programs, Delaware Statutory Trust Programs, which was an investment program that you don't have to manage. She was pulling about a 6% dividend with a 9% tax equivalent yield. The point is, she was making more money in her retirement than she ever did as a hairdresser, just by virtue of seeing the east side of Austin explode over the last 3 years as Austin has expanded into the east side. And so as a tool for working class people like her, it's fantastic. I mean, she just saved $300,000. Imagine giving that to the government as if, they would do anything better with it. Yes.
So if you have a $300,000 tax liability potential, and you choose to use a 1031, what is the fee that you charge, approximately percentage, that would have been put up?
It's a flat fee. Runs between $1,000 and $1,500. I mean, the company that I work for is called IPX 1031. It's the nation's largest. We do 20 to 30,000 exchanges per year. When we do an exchange, that money comes into us. We immediately set up its own separate segregated bank account. We put it into the large institutional banks, Citi, Wells, Chase, Fifth Third, US Bank. And then we insure that account with a $100 million fidelity bond, $50 million third-party insurance, $30 million errors and omissions. And by we, IPX is owned by Fidelity National, which is a Fortune 300, $11 billion insurance company. And so we've been doing this for over 30 years. We've never failed to deliver the money that we've held temporarily for up to 180 days. And we have that reputation and that track record. But it doesn't cost much. And if you're asking why it doesn't cost much, it's because we're currently holding $4.5 billion of United States exchange money in those banks, earning some points. That's really where we make our money. The problem right now is overnight money is next to nothing. We're not earning anywhere near what we used to, but it's still a good gig. Yes, sir.
I diverge just a little bit from the 1031 thing. You mentioned that residences don't qualify. Is there any solution for residences?
Yes. Here's an example. It's coming to San Antonio. It's a better Austin example though. Married couple, married for 40 years, well into their 60s or 70s, bought in Central Austin 40 years ago for $35,000. And now they want to sell the property, and the 121 home exemption for primary residence only covers a married couple for up to $500,000. The first $500,000 is tax-free under the 121. It's a great tax break in most situations, but their problem is the value of their property grew by $1 million. The second half of that gain is going to get taxed, not at the capital gains rate, but at the individual rate. You're talking, trending towards 35%. So what would that couple do? This is the only thing that you could do. Move out of that house and rent it. The house that they've had for 40 years, rent that house for 2 years. When you move out of the house, rent or buy another property. That'll be your primary residence going forward. The property that you rented for 2 years, that you'd owned for 40, now became 1031 eligible because it's now an investment property. Kick the tenants out after 2 years. Sell the property between year 2 and year 3, and you can actually take advantage of both tax breaks. Under the 121, if they live there for 2 out of the last 5 years, it counts. So there's $1 million of gain. The first $500,000 under the 121, completely tax-free. They're taking $500,000 out tax-free. The second $500,000, which was always the problem, well, you turned it into an investment property by virtue of renting it for 2 years. You can now exchange that portion. I would take $500,000 and exchange that on behalf of those taxpayers. They can take the first $500,000 tax-free under the 121. And that is really the only way that you can think of trying to figure out a way of not paying the tax on a primary residence. But it's only an issue if you're married and the gain exceeds $500,000. For the most part, the 121 covers you as long as you haven't lived there forever and as long as the gain hasn't exceeded $500,000. The second is when a rancher calls or a farmer calls and says, I need to exchange my ranch or farm. And the first question is, okay, there's no question you can exchange your ranch or farm. That's investment property, that's business property. But I'll ask, do you live there? And if the rancher or farmer says, yes, I do live there, I'll say, okay, get your agent on the phone. I need the comps of your house. I can't exchange your house. But under the 121, we can carve out the value of the house and you can get that tax-free. So if a rancher says, I'm selling the ranch for $5 million, and he tells me that his house is worth $500,000, what will happen is when it sells, I'll exchange 4.5 million, and the first $500,000 goes to him and his wife under the 121. So there are situations like that where if you're living on an investment property like a ranch or farm, we can still take advantage of the 121 home exemption by virtue of carving out just strictly the house and the driveway and the acre of yard or whatever it might be. Any others? Yes, sir.
Or what happens if people don't know their original cost that they bought it from? Do they estimate it? How does that happen?
If you don't know, I mean, you should have the paperwork. If it got lost in a fire,
Yeah.
like my grades at the University of Wisconsin, it's a terrible accident. You should be able to go back to the tax records of that year. You should be able to. I mean, the real estate people should know how to do that, and you can get an estimate. I don't think it has to be perfect, but knowing what the tax rolls were at that particular year, you can get a pretty good understanding of what that value was, and therefore what the gain is. Yes, sir.
So what about the reverse 1031? Can you kind of explain that? I've seen people very interested in doing that, where they may find a piece of property that they want to purchase, but they haven't sold theirs yet.
The reverse is the opposite, the reverse of a regular delayed exchange. A regular exchange, which is really what I was discussing, because we do 98% of our exchanges are delayed exchange. And that's when the relinquished property sells first. And the QI takes the money and the taxpayer has 180 days to buy the replacement property. And that's the way it typically is. A reverse exchange is done, and they're getting more popular. A reverse exchange is done when you buy the replacement property first. So the taxpayer is arranged to buy a replacement property. They intend to sell the relinquished property and do an exchange. But the relinquished property hasn't sold yet. The replacement property must close on time. So they would call a company like us, and we would create an LLC, and we would buy the replacement property on behalf of the taxpayer. It has to be this way. The taxpayer can't buy the property and then sell his property because they can't exchange for themselves. But if they give us the money to buy the property that they intend to ultimately exchange into, that works. So we would create an LLC, and the taxpayer would give us the money. We would buy the replacement property, and now the exchange has begun. Taxpayer has 180 days to sell the relinquished property. Sell the relinquished property within 180 days. That money is now freed up. That is the exchange money. That replaces the money that they gave us to buy the property on their behalf. We give them title to the property that we bought on their behalf and the money, which is really like a short-term loan. They put up the money, they're going to get it back, because as soon as the relinquished property exchange money gets freed up, that takes the place of the money that was initially given to us to buy their property. So the issue with the reverse is it's a lot more expensive. I mentioned the price of a regular exchange, $1,000 to $1,500. That's very common. A reverse exchange starts at about $6,000 or $7,000, can go up as high as $15,000. So considerably more expensive. And the reason for that is we've got to buy your property. The paperwork involved in that, the time and effort is a lot more than a regular old delayed exchange. But it certainly is something for taxpayers to consider, and it's getting more popular because everyone from Dallas down to San Antonio selling these properties in this corridor knows that they can sell their relinquished property. It's going to sell. Someone's going to buy it, and you'll probably still get a good price on it regardless. But as difficult as buying your replacement property. If you start a regular exchange, sell your relinquished property, you only have 45 days to even find your replacement property. You could find your replacement property, but there's 20 other people fighting for it as well. You could lose, and now your exchange has failed. So reverses, because they're more expensive, typically are done by people who have a huge tax hit. And the idea of paying, $7, $8, $9,000 for a more expensive exchange is not a big deal because they've got a $100,000 tax hit staring them in the face. So, if they pull this off and they save $90,000 in taxes, they're still, very, very happy. And it probably is easier to go out and find the property that you want, bid for it. You'll probably overpay for it. That's not the end of the world. But when you get it, then you sell your relinquished property, get that up for sale. And again, odds are, with all the cash that's, flying around, you'll be able to close that within 60 days, and your reverse exchange will be successful. Did you have a question, sir? Doug?
Back to the farm and ranch, would your homestead essentially carve out the residence?
If it indeed is your residence, your primary residence,
It has to be if it's homestead.
it actually doesn't. It doesn't. Homestead is a Texas thing. The IRS doesn't care. But you're right. I mean, ultimately, that homestead, the value of that primary residence, that is correct. I guess what I was trying to get at is there are ranch situations where they'll call and they do have the house on the ranch, but they moved out of it 5 years ago, but never bothered changing the homestead status. The IRS doesn't care. I mean, if you either live there, now if you live there with or without homestead status, then you live there, it's a primary residence and you're under the 121. In that case, they don't live there, they kept the homestead status, the IRS doesn't care. It's going to be entirely a 1031 because no one has lived there. Any others? Yes, sir.
Does this apply only to individuals? What if properties are owned by LLCs, corporations, or what have you?
Everybody, every tax-paying entity, individuals, LLCs, partnerships, trusts, it doesn't matter. They're all eligible to do 1031s. They're all taxpayers. All right, the hook is coming.
Y'all keep asking if you have more questions for Carl.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you to the A&M Club.
Carl, before you step down, as a thank you from the San Antonio A&M Club, we've got you a box of Boulder Fiesta spices, Aggie owned and operated, that we'd like to
Thank you.
you put on your next grilling. It's awesome.
Excellent.
So thank you very much for your time. Safe travels back. Again, come back next Monday to be determined. My speaker, I've got several offers out, and so I'll have that up on the website here shortly. Thank everyone. Be careful. Have a great Monday. Diego.